Hello, Katharina. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what are you doing right now?
Sure. Hello. So really nice to be on the show. Yeah, my name is Katharina and I'm a deputy VP for data at World Data Lab. So I'm basically a data scientist and I'm working mostly with economic data, labor market data, demographic data at World Data Lab to solve different data related problems.
You mentioned problems. On DDDM FM podcast, we like to talk about the problems. So, what's your problem? If you could, share.
Sure. So the biggest problem that we saw at World Data Lab a few years ago when the company was founded was that there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of data that could be helpful, but it's often quite outdated. It's old. It's from surveys that are from a few years ago. And then there's some forecasts, but these data types are usually not related. And also the data is often stored in a big database in a way that's only accessible for data experts, basically, but not for everyone. And we thought that many people would need more data in their daily lives.
Mm-hmm.
One main group of people we thought of was like companies who want to know their target groups and how they are developing and where they will find them. And for these companies, it's we thought usually hard to go into like a big database and scroll through many surveys and try to combine that with other data and things like that. So we wanted to bring these data together and make sure we bring them to people in an accessible way and we add value by making something out of it that makes sense, where you can draw insights for your business.
Okay, so where did you start? Like, what steps did you take to solve this problem?
So first of all, we looked at all the data that's available. So our founders mainly came from the World Bank. So they had a lot of knowledge on survey data and forecasts for more like general data sets like GDP, together with a few people. And I was lucky enough to be one of the first joining here. We looked for different types of data that could be interesting and helpful, especially looking at consumer spending. What do you need? Like surveys that give you the distribution, that tell you how many poor people are there, how many rich people are there in a society, how does that distribution look like? And then also we wanted to look at forecasts. As I said before, outdated data doesn't really help. Who wants to know how the landscape looked like 10 years ago, how many consumers there were? So we looked also at credible macro level forecasts and we thought about how to bring this together. And then also one main issue that we saw was that oftentimes these types of data would not fit together. So you would have maybe a survey that gives you the distribution, that tells you how much inequality there is, but then you have totals, national totals, like total household expenditure, and usually they would just not match. So you would see there has to be something wrong. And then we dig a bit deeper and we found that usually in surveys you have this underreporting. So especially richer people will not really give exact information about how much they spend. So we tried to think about how we could bring this together, how we could fill these gaps and bring together outdated data with forecasts, data gaps, fill them up and make a consistent picture. And this we wanted to do on a global level. So we also thought about how we could fill data gaps for countries that did not have good data, because you have good data for many countries, but then there's still quite a few where you don't have a lot of information, or generally maybe the GDP and the demographic distribution of people, but you don't really know how much they spend. And then these were the main challenges that we want to approach, basically.
And what happened next? Like you have these challenges, and what would happen next, basically?
So basically, we invested some time. We worked together with professors from university, from Vienna University of Economics and Business. We worked together with a few first clients to see what actually are their needs, what do they want. And then we started really writing code and developing algorithms that would fill these gaps and solve these problems. So for example, with the underreporting, that was a big issue because you would just not get total actual consumer spending from the surveys. And we saw that if we just give everyone like 10% extra, for example, to get to the correct total, you would really get an incorrect picture, because you would lose all the people in poverty because they don't really underreport so much. They can't really underreport because they don't have a lot anyway. So we played around and developed an algorithm that would add extra spending to the richer people. So the more you spend, based on what you report in the survey, the more extra you would get. And then we would fill the distribution up until we get to the correct totals, for example. And then so the complete household spending in the distribution adds up to the correct total. This was, for example, one thing that we worked on for quite some time. And then we also, for example, we developed an algorithm also to get reasonable estimates for countries that don't have good data. So you have countries where you have just the basics like GDP, the demographics, and to fill these gaps for these countries and really make reasonable predictions, we have developed a method that was actually tried for predicting poverty in North Korea. And we even published a paper on that in Nature. And we use that method. And this method is really about finding similar countries. Similar countries that could have a similar distribution. So we look at the basic data that we have, and we look based on these parameters for like the nearest neighbors. So not like geographically, but like what is a country that has a similar demographic structure in the population and things like that. What is a country that might have similar education levels? And then we average over the 6 most similar countries in a specific way. We do a weighted averaging to get to the distributions in 4 countries that were missing, basically. And we have also done here quite a lot of quality assurance. So we have tried out different parameters here for tuning the model, and we have then controlled the outcomes using data for countries that we actually do have, where we have a distribution. We acted as if we would not have this distribution, and then basically tried to predict it with other countries. And this is how we really refined and then found a good approach.
You mentioned steps you took, but what was the goal you are trying to achieve? Like how this information is being used or was used?
So our goal was internally, we wanted a data set that's complete, that's up to date. So that's nowcasted and also forecasted. So we also combined then the latest information on distributions with economic forecasts to see how consumer spending will develop in the future. And also we wanted a global data set that covers all countries. So these are really our goals. And this is also what we heard from the first clients that we worked with. So they were really interested in this forward-looking type of data because they knew that there's like outdated surveys, but they didn't really know what to do with them because they wanted to do what happens in the next 5 or 10 years. And also this global perspective, I think was something important because we wanted to have comparable data on a global level so that especially for global organizations and companies, they can see how different countries might compare. So how does China compare to India, for example? So we also we have data in nominal dollars, of course, but then also in purchasing power parities. And this is how we also want to make it more comparable. So this was one more thing that we worked on.
Okay.
And since then, in the last few years, we've been really working more on breaking this down further. So we have by country, but now we have data also broken down by age and gender. How much do women spend as compared to men? And then we went further to city level, for example, how much do people spend in individual cities? Also very interesting to see differences within countries. And one big effort was also then to break this down into product categories. So what do people spend their money on? And there are other surveys that we, again, integrated to bring in that perspective.
And how did you structure your team for this project? Who was involved in this project?
So, of course, in these steps that I've just described, it was mainly data scientists, but actually that's not the complete picture because that was more like what I was also working on. We have, of course, several data scientists, and most of us have an economics background, which is helpful to understand these like spending distributions and things like that. But in addition to the data scientists, we also have like a complete team on other things that we want to provide. So for example, we also provide this data set in a nice web tools. We have actually several web tools and clocks online where you can see our data live and presented in an approachable way. So we have a whole tech team that takes care of not just the websites, but also APIs and really bringing the data to our clients in an accessible way, presenting our company. So we have a tech team. And then we have, of course, also sales. We have people that try to identify clients and, of course, support them, help them, try to also connect the data and tech side with the clients and see what would they need, what can we develop next. So that's really like a whole team. And then we have design, for example, design people that help us to design the websites in a way that they are like approachable, easy to understand for the clients. So it's really like a big team actually in the background.
Awesome. And while working on this project, like, what were the biggest obstacles you faced? Maybe some kind of issues with data availability, maybe some kind of technical challenges, and basically, how did you overcome this challenge?
Yeah, so I think there were many obstacles along the way that we solved one by one, and it was really something that it grew over time. I would say one big obstacle was what I've maybe described before, to make sure that we bring together the survey data and the distributions with correct totals, and also potentially the forecasting to see how can we forecast, especially when we now go to different product categories, for example. We don't just want to create like linear forecasts and assume things will develop the same as they have done so far, because we see that that's often not really accurate. So in forecasting, we also invest quite some time. For example, we make use of different demographic forecasts that are available, because especially the spending on different product categories depends a lot on the demographics. You see that younger people spend quite differently as compared to older people. And then we also see that the generations tend to spend differently. So the generation that's maybe 30 today doesn't spend exactly in the same way as the people that were like 30, 10 years ago. So we try to bring in these things, developments in demographics, also considering how education, for example, affects fertility and what that means for the coming generations. I think these were a few of the obstacles. And then, of course, also finding good data, because we had to go to many different statistics offices to really get all the data, collect the data from different sources. So we started more with like big databases that have surveys from many countries, but often that's not enough, or you're missing some countries, or you don't get the latest information. So we also go a lot to different individual statistics offices, try to get the best and the latest data, and then really harmonize the data ourselves so we make it comparable across countries.
And as everyone is smart after, project is ongoing or project is finished, and everyone is very smart then, what would you do differently if you were about to start this project all over again, having this experience you have right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think maybe we would try to think even more strategically from the start, really where we want to go and which features we want to integrate. Because the way we approached it in the beginning was more like, okay, let's get good national numbers. And then we thought, okay, actually clients also need demographics. Let's try to integrate age and gender. And then we built several things on top, like let's break it down subnationally, let's add product categories. And I think that did work well. And I think maybe it was the only way to really find always the next interesting thing. But of course, I think it grew in a way, like the code pipeline grew in a way that now we have to rework more often to make sure everything is like smooth and works together really well. So I think this is just whenever you start with something and it develops over time, you don't maybe have the most efficient code from the start. So we had reasonable results, but it was maybe just like taking a bit longer to run. And we had to think a lot about how we bring things together so everything stays consistent. So I think maybe we would try to go even more strategically from the start. Okay, where do we really want to go? And then how can we build this all in one pipeline?
And what specific tools or platforms were essential in gathering, processing, or analyzing the data for this project?
So the data analytics we do mostly in R, a little bit also in Python, depending on what exactly we want to do. So this is the most important tool. And then definitely we use Git a lot and GitHub because we work a lot together. There's actually always several people working on the same code. So Git really helps us to stay aligned and make sure we have one version of the code and everyone's on the same page. I think these were the most important tools. And then, of course, we are trying always to be up to date with the methods that we use. We use different machine learning methods. We use like random forests, Bayesian model averaging. And we often also try out, if we approach something new, we try out different methods to see what works best and then do some out of sample validation and then we go for that method.
And what do you think will happen in the future? Like, do you think like AI will take over the world and we'll be fighting for our survival as a human race, or you see something great on the horizon in the terms of new technologies and you're excited about that, and you're even starting to using this right now with your work?
Yeah, so we're definitely using AI also a lot and increasingly. And I'm optimistic generally. I think that it can be very helpful and make our work lives more efficient. It can take some of the more annoying tasks from us or reduce that and give us more time to really think and maybe work together, connect and think more deeply about the cool and interesting things. So I'm generally optimistic. I think it will play a bigger and bigger role. Definitely. And we're also using AI. I mean, we're definitely using like machine learning for our models, but we're also increasingly using maybe ChatGPT just for simpler tasks to help us with writing something up in a nice way and things like that. So I think it will come in more, and it's definitely important to try to stay on top and use it and not ignore it. But I think it can help a lot with productivity and efficiency.
Okay, and on the very practical level, how you are using AI to make your work faster or better?
So yeah, different types of AI that we're using, I think, in different occasions. So definitely we're using a lot of machine learning in our models. That's one side to it. And that's, I think, making our models better, just helping us to improve our results. But then actually also like in everyday work life, I'm using ChatGPT and similar models to also do simpler things like help me summarize this paragraph in a few bullet points, help me with presentations and things like that that are not like the core of my work, but still important. And I think for exactly these things, it can also be super helpful.
Awesome.
And it can maybe one more thing, it can super be helpful if you have like big amounts of data that are not really harmonized yet, to help you also harmonize, for example, identify in surveys certain product categories, where does a certain item belong to, things like that, to really like help organizing data, ordering, structuring data. I think this is also something where LLMs can be helpful.
Awesome. And finally, like, based on your experience, what one advice would you give someone who's looking to leveraging using data more efficiently in their business?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one thing that I'd say is also maybe look at our data and try out our data. We have also a lot of platforms where we have data that's oriented more towards development, like poverty, emissions, that is publicly available for free. And we try to present it in an interactive and easy to use way. And then, of course, if you're in a business, we have all these consumer spending information, really granular to the needs of different clients. So one thing is maybe I would be so happy if you want to give this a try and try out our data at worlddata.io. And apart from that, I think it's a lot of learning by doing and just looking for the information that's out there. I think there's also really a lot of information available for free online if you know how to use it, to find it, and it's a lot of learning by doing to get there. So I think especially today with ChatGPT, you can ask even for sources for specific data on ChatGPT and just get started. And just don't be afraid to get started. Look into new data sets, and then over time you'll get a better feeling and discover more sources, more information, and really just feel more familiar with the data.
Thank you so much for being a part of DDM FM podcast and answering all my questions today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.